What is up? Welcome back to Fudge Muppet. I'm Scott here with Michael, and today we've got another discussion for you. When I was making the recent Hermaeus Mora deep dive video, which you should go check out, I'll link it in the description, I was really thinking about Mirac a lot, and then I was thinking about Alduin, and then also I started just sort of applying this thought to the rest of Skyrim. But Skyrim has a theme.
Skyrim is not what you think.
Yeah.
The story of Skyrim, or the stories of Skyrim, there is a theme. Like, many people think Skyrim is about the uncertainty of the future, about power, about religious freedom. There's all kinds of themes you could say Skyrim is about. And, you know, there's no right or wrong answer here. However, there is a really cool thing that Scott said to me, which I haven't heard before. Probably the coolest thing about Skyrim I've heard in years, when you start to tie it through together. And I've got notes in the Elder Scroll, which is all taped together to kind of help this talk flow a bit more. But this has the answers you seek.
With no more suspense, it's essentially that it's about oathbreakers.
Oathbreakers and the abandonment of duty.
Yeah, failing to adhere to the duty that was given to you, and the abandonment of duty, not for any necessarily moral reason, because you could argue that some oaths are worthy of being broken because, you know, they're evil or something like that. But I guess we could first point to, we'll talk about the main.
Well, we'll talk about a lot, but the main story is obviously with the last Dragonborn and Alduin. And Alduin, obviously, his job is to eat the world. He is the world eater, and instead of eating the world, he decided to, you know, go on a huge power fantasy trip of his own and essentially rule over men and become a tyrant, which then leads to you, the player, being created. You know, Akatosh supposedly imbues a mortal, well, not a mortal, but one with the soul of a dragon, sends him into the world to right the wrongs of Alduin and save the world, or, if you've heard our theory, ensure the world can be eaten at a later date.
And that's the sort of the theme of that is, you know, the last Dragonborn correcting the wrongs of the past. But it all started with Alduin turning against his duty to instead become essentially a king of the world. And you could even
what does that teach us?
Yeah,
I will say real quick, there's no we may have an upcoming video that really hones in on a message here, but in this video I want to give you as many examples as I can because this theme is just so heavy.
We're hoping to basically get some feedback because I wanted to approach and make it in a sort of essay form first, but I thought that it would be better to
the backdrop of Skyrim.
Well, yeah, let's talk of the backdrop.
The backdrop of Skyrim. The Empire, have abandoned their duty to Talos. They've abandoned their people essentially by signing the White Gold Concordat, allowing the Thalmor to impose their religious controls on I guess you could call them the empires of men or the provinces of men who want to worship
I guess
Talos.
That might not have been as strictly as an oath to Talos, but it's kind of implied that the Talos, the founder of your empire, you went against your very own founder and originator and basically say, nah, he's not a god anymore, as you have been saying for the last 600 years, well, a bit less than that, but you know, that's the first important big
and we have a crumbling empire as a result.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've also got people's response to that. And you've got Ulfric Stormcloak, right? The whole Markarth incident occurs. So he goes back, he comes home from the war. He's already really, really annoyed that the White Concordat was signed. That's already seen as a betrayal, that the Talos worship is outlawed. But instead, he goes to Markarth to help out with the Reachman problem. Basically wipes out the Reachman, takes Markarth back, and he wants to he agreed with the Empire, or it might have been just specifically the Jarl with the Imperial control, so on, that, we'll give you Talos worship back if you can get Markarth back. He gets Markarth back, everything's all sweet, and they're like, nah, we can't do that because, you know, we're already pushing a frail peace. So an oath was breaking, and then he goes to jail, and then later he comes out and so on, and becomes Ulfric, who himself becomes an oathbreaker when, you know, duty to a high king and to an empire and so on, and then he walks up and basically kills the high king.
Yes, and not to mention as well him giving up information when he was captured with the Great War. So he abandons his own kind of oaths to the empire, gives up information which isn't what led to it being seized, but he was told that it was. And so him breaking his oath creates this whole system of cope which in his brain, which we've talked about before in other videos, which you should check out. Which, essentially fuels his destructive tendencies and rampage. That's not to say the Stormcloak cause is justified or not justified, but like if you just isolate it, his oath breaking is what's behind all of that. That energy in him as a leader. So, even as well, I was going to say, just in a side note, even the Greybeards, they're kind of like more pacifist as well. And there's this whole theme throughout Skyrim too, which you can obviously see in the 4th era, where the Nords have, in a way, abandoned their oath or their duty to the old gods, the old way, the traditional Nords. They have become imperialized over time and thus are like a crumbling culture or society. They don't worship the Nordic gods of the old pantheon. They might say, oh, by sure, this and that, but you don't go into the temples and see like, oh, here's the temple of Junal, and things like that. Even like Froki's shack being such a like specific example of a kind worshipper being such an old thing that isn't really tolerated anymore. So like Jürgen Winkola becoming all like, oh, we should just use our voice to worship the gods and pray and stuff. It's just another example of this kind of like pacifist mentality, the changing of the tides, I suppose, and the Nords becoming less of an aggressive, like, how they used to be, the strong Nords. Again, not good or bad, just different, but it goes with the theme.
And I mean, to go back, like just to dip also into the first era around the same Alduin time, and this is partially built on a littlest bit of speculation, but it's like an assumption that's pretty valid. It's with Miraak. Well, first, which is not an assumption, is that Miraak betrayed his oath as a dragon priest and turned against the dragons and started, and helping Hermaeus Mora and
then what happened as a result? There's the lesson. Mora trapped him.
Yeah,
and the only thing that can save the day from the broken or the abandonment of his duty with Alduin is the Dragonborn, a divine intervention. A divine intervention is needed to save the world from Miraak, and how he's going into and potentially divine intervention with the Dragonborn if the Dragonborn canonically decides the outcome of the Civil War. So
one thing to say about that too is that his assumed oath breaking, it's more so like the implicit function of the Dragonborn perhaps was, and because he was the first, was to basically fix the wrongs of Alduin. The idea being that Miraak was there and blessed by Akatosh for this purpose, then he didn't do it, then Alduin gets sent forth into the future with an Elder Scroll, and then the last Dragonborn gets blessed to do it, and then also like go back, but instead he went off with Hermaeus Mora to pursue knowledge and such.
Here's the quotes that just to support that. I got the quotes on the Holy Scroll of Abandonment. It says, "They wanted to use me to deal with Alduin, Hakon, and the rest. I chose otherwise. So you have slain Alduin, well done. I could have slain him myself back when I walked the earth, but I chose a different path. Felling Alduin was a mighty deed, and I thank you for it. He would have proved troublesome to me." So it kind of sounds like what you're saying could definitely be the case. And it's funny because if you want to talk about DLC in general, this may be a little bit of a stretch, but we're not afraid to stretch in the discussion videos. The Dawnguard DLC is literally about a man who betrays his family and kind of goes against, as a father to the family, kind of like abandons them, sacrifices 1,000 of his own innocent people to his kingdom. To Molag Bal, and subjects his daughter and wife to the treatment of Molag Bal. A horrible betrayal. There's a lot of betrayal as well in that theme of oath breaking and stuff. But then ironically, in his search to gain power by doing all this and turning his back on the people he's supposed to love, it's the family itself which becomes his undoing, with his own daughter teaming up with Dragonborn, divine intervention, save the day, that comes back to stop it all.
And to just throw this out here too, just to quickly, if people are, oh yeah, but this is a very common theme. If you were to look at, say, Oblivion or even Morrowind before it, it is not
nearly
throughout it. It's not as nearly as prevalent.
We haven't even finished. Wait till we're going main factions.
We're going to go through all the factions, everything, but so far you've got the whole setup of the Civil War and the political background of Skyrim. You've got the whole metaphysical situation with Alduin, with Miraak, and the Dragonborn status. Also, to speculate further on that, maybe the last Dragonborn might even become, turn away from his oaths or whatever to continue forth as like a hero.
Yeah, we don't know.
If he becomes champion of Hermaeus Mora, which is like one of the more canon sort of outcomes, you know.
Let's look at the main factions, and now you can compare these to the main factions in Oblivion and stuff, and you'll see that they're very different. Oblivion seems to have disconnected stories without as much of a strong uniting theme, which if anything can be good. I really like Oblivion's factions, but Thieves Guild, Skyrim, it's run down. It's not doing too well. Why? Because it's cursed. Why is it cursed? Because someone abandoned their oath to Nocturnal as a nightingale, aka Mercer Frey. So Mercer Frey betrays the guild, kills Gallus. He takes the skeleton key, and so the guild falls out of favor with Nocturnal, and it's not until that wrong can be made right with the skeleton key retrieved and taken back that the guild can be blessed again, and prosperity can continue.
It's interesting that it's not exactly like, because this is one thing we were saying. It's not necessarily a moral take or anything, like, because oath-breaking arguably could be, but there is this theme of the divine getting their comeuppance for, oh, you broke an oath to me, I'm coming back. Whether it's Hermaeus Mora or Akatosh or Nocturnal, it's like there's a few more to come.
I don't want to put a moral spin on it. It's just kind of more. It's more, at the moment at least. It's more of an it is what it is. Yeah. Because, like you said, who's the oath to? What's the purpose of it? It's kind of like it can get.
I mean, if you look at like Nocturnal's not necessarily the greatest moral person ever, so it's like maybe breaking an oath to her is.
Yeah. Anyway, the companion storyline is a very interesting one. When you think about it, this is a faction that has long since abandoned the kind of culture and the way of life, its roots, in favor of her scene. So. With Isgramor, the roots with Isgramor. And arguably the Silver Hand coming in, causing trouble, killing Kodlak. If you've watched our video on the Silver Hand and potentially what they were gonna be or should be or what they are, is that they seem like ex-companions who are obsessed with Isgramor, if you see the books on their corpses, despite them being from all different races, who continually show an obsession with Wuthrad and not just killing werewolves. And this all starts when the companions long ago turn to Hircine and accept the gifts of a Daedric prince, instead of staying true to like this, Nordic strong culture that Isgramor would have been all about. Again, see, you can't put a moral spin on Isgramor's way of life where he just comes in and slaughters elves, but they turned away from the roots. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and it's like ever since too. Like, I think there's the very first guy who signs up with Hircine, the very first Harbinger, Turfig. He does it, but regrets it. But every single one after is like willingly, like, this is great. Like, turned away from the true path.
For sure. And you can see that they just don't care anymore. Like when you're a werewolf and you rampage through Whiterun, or you wake up and Ayla's like in the forest, like, oh, haha, you were, like, woo, be hard to handle. But like, oh, I could have just slaughtered everyone in Whiterun. Yeah. LOL. The Dark Brotherhood is a great example of this. It's less traditional. It's cutthroat. It's about the money, and essentially Astrid's running the whole joint for fame and money. And she basically, like, there are some really good quotes from Astrid where she goes, the Night Mother, literally, like, represents a chapter in the Dark Brotherhood's history that has long since been closed. Today we live by our own rules. Only by foregoing the old ways have we survived for so long. And then later she goes, obeying the Night Mother, you being the listener, it's ridiculous. No offense. Cicero may have overheard me talking to one of the others about the Night Mother. It was possible I was not entirely respectful. But then in the end, when Astrid betrays you, essentially sells out the Dark Brotherhood thinking that she'd ensure their safety, then she performs like the sacrament with herself, and she's on the ground and everything. She says, I wanted things to stay the way they were before. She goes, you were right. The Night Mother was right. The old ways, they guided the Dark Brotherhood for centuries. I was a fool to oppose them. And so she literally says at the start, oh, the new ways, and then as she's dying, oh, the old ways were right. I was wrong for abandoning the Night Mother's teaching. And
again, it's another one of those sort of like divine interventions. Like they get, like if you break an oath to these gods or to whatever these higher beings, if you don't fall into their plan, it will come back and get you. Even going back, like throughout the whole setting, it really is there. I forgot what I was going to mention, but let's talk the next one.
The College of Winterhold is not as straightforward as the other three, I will admit. However, If you've watched my video on the problem with the College of Winterhold, then you'll know there are many problems with it. However, one could argue that it is currently not really the institution it used to be. It is led by a man who has definitely is not fulfilling his duty to be a good archmage. He's a terrible archmage. He betrayed his duty of care essentially to students that he took into Labyrinthian, and then when Mordecai came out, he essentially sacrificed them, trapping them in magics. His friends.
I think there's a quote at some point where he's like, when there's only like 2 left, it's like, we 3 can do it. We'll have each other's backs no matter what. Makes an oath just before they walk in. Right
before it happens, he traps them to save himself and obviously to lock away the dragon priest and escape. And he obviously is not the best leader. It leads him, he feels deep shame, but then he kind of copes himself out of it. And when you talk to him, he really doesn't care. Like, he's sarcastic. He makes all these snarky comments and he goes, "Oh, what are you going to tell me? Another one of the students got incinerated." Like, dude, like he's terrible. And I can't remember exactly what it's called, but something like, the more I think about it, the more I think Savos is the worst archmage of all time, as a Reddit post, and it's just a huge rip just of Savos Aaron, which is great. But I mean, it was even him, he's got Thalmor Spy in there as his advisor, and Kano, like, again, there's not like a strong, like, I took an oath, but I feel like when you become an archmage of any institution, your duty is to, like, be a good leader. He's not doing that.
It's like, it's kind of like, broadly you could apply it to like oath-breaking traditions and everything as well throughout the setting. And, there really is that reprisal from gods sort of part of it. Maybe not so as much.
Again, as we said, with the college, it's not as like clear-cut and strong as the other 3. But I mean, like 3 out of 4 is still huge.
Like it really is all over. Like the companions is about we fell from the old ways, we fell from tradition, we've got to return this way. Bad things happen because of it. Same as the Dark Brotherhood. Same thing as the Thieves Guild. Same thing as Ulfric's whole rebellion is we're falling from the tradition of
Civil War. It's just everywhere. As some final notes, you do see some of this in Daedric Prince quests, although that's expected from Daedric Princes, to be honest. They often have, this person was worshipping me. They abandoned their duty to worship me in favor of themselves. In Skyrim, we see it with Periite, with Orchendor, who was leading the Afflicted, and then he basically decided to abandon Periite and become their kind of like leader. You see it as well with Malakath, with Yamaz being a weak orc. He's not true to
he's just trying to secure his place still. He doesn't want
he's not being true to the way of the orcs and true to the way of Malakath, and therefore the giants are attacking the stronghold. You see it with you don't see it that much with Azura, like a little bit, but he's not like an Azura follower. He's more like a College of Winterhold guy trying to save his life. And then starts corrupting her artifact. Then she drives him nuts. He kills his students, flees, corrupts the artifact, and goes inside it. But he still gets his divine intervention at the end of the day. A big one, actually, a character who's all about this is Aranda from Vaymina's Waking Nightmare quest, because he was literally a priest of Vaymina who abandoned Vaymina, and his oaths to his friends left them all to kind of die, because the miasma is this really dangerous gas if you're exposed to it for long periods of time, which they were, which he activated to send the invading orcs to sleep and his friends to sleep while he escaped. And now he's all about trying to right his wrongs and come back and get you to help.
And if you follow Vaymina's word, he gets his comeuppance if you kill him.
You kill him if you listen to Vaymina.
It's that really thing, and really, I guess in the broader sort of sense of it, it's like, asking what's the message? What does it mean by this? But it kind of
stay true to your word.
It really kind of seems to be quite a pro-tradition, pro-God kind of thing.
It does feel like it, doesn't it?
Like every single instance. Like, and that's not like a moral implication or anything. Like, even if your gods are arguably immoral, like sort of like Night Mother Sithis kind of thing, or Daedric Princes, it's like, it's just like, it's kind of, it's hubris kind of related things, or selfish gain. It's like anti-selfish gain in that regard. But I
know it's very interesting, and I can't wait to elaborate even further on this.
Yeah, I was going to say jump into the comments too and add what you can 100%. And so on, have a think about it.
Let us know what you think.
It's a pretty persistent theme.
100%.
It's like,
And it's such a cool idea too, because as soon as you told me, I was like, wow, like, and you keep going and you're like, there's probably more we've missed.
Yeah.
But even without, like, in this video we include all these examples, but even without stretching it, like really far. Even if you just take the most rock solid examples, there's still heaps of it. So it's really cool.
It's like even role play, you can't really even role play outside of this because you're always on the side of the god or whatever. So you become a nightingale to right the wrong of Mercer Frey, or you become the listener to return it to its roots, or you become the new harbinger to. Well, I guess you can
stay as a werewolf, as a vampire, but obviously then you have to serve her scene in the afterlife. Same with Nocturnal, but anyway, again, the message is yet to be fully figured out, but thank you so much for watching. Social media links are in the description below, as is a link to our Patreon if you want to help support us, of course, only if you can afford it, and our merch as well, if you want to help support us and get a nice looking t-shirt. And we look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.